holiday and not the weekly portion. Hence, you would have a gap of a week. But usually, having set aside that difference, usually the reading is the same every synagogue you go, okay? And then the reading of the portion of the prophets is usually similar. There are different traditions. So Ashkenazi Jews may read one part, Sephardic Jews a different part, even though usually similar, and Yemenite Jews may read a different part. But the concept is that you read something from the prophets, and the idea is the idea, I should say, having talked about the different concepts and the different reasons that were suggested, is probably to show that unlike, let's say, Samaritans or other factions, we accept not just the 5 books of Moses, not just the Torah, but we accept the whole Tanakh, and certainly the prophets. Okay, so we read from the Torah and the Haftarah, but we don't just randomly choose a part of the prophets we read, but we read a part that has some connection to the Torah reading. And what we'll try to do, we'll try to talk about a certain point of comparison between the Torah and the Haftarah in today, and hopefully in coming meetings as well. This week or weekly portion of Chayei Sarah is also in Israel known as Shabbat Hebron, the Sabbath of Hebron, because this is the weekly portion on which Abram makes the effort of buying Hebron. It's very interesting that the places that were bought by the patriarchs are some of the most contentious places today. Okay, so Abram buys the Cave of Machpelah in Hebron, pays, has the deed and everything, and it's contentious. Okay, so Jacob buys the tomb of Joseph, pays everything, contentious. David buys the Temple Mount. He can conquer it, guys. He has a military force there, but he chooses to buy. Say for Abram, who's offered, they say, no, you get it for free. Not you get it for free. I'm not getting into the details, but in a sense, they say, we're not selling. If you want to bury your king here, it would be an honor for us, but we're not selling. And Abram insists, in a very interesting kind of a Middle Eastern bazaar negotiation kind of ways. He ends up paying quite a nice sum for it, but he buys it. And all of these places that were actually bought and paid for and insisted on paying for are very contentious, okay, today. So one of the very interesting points of history. And so we're going to talk about that connection between the Torah and the Haftarah and the importance of Hebron. Maybe a little bit of what's going on in the neighborhood of the Middle East, and whichever questions you want to do. So the plan is for an hour and a half that started 20 minutes ago. And yeah, for that, I remember the drill sergeant saying, you have a 1 minute that started 15 seconds ago, right? So same concept. And we're starting with the first verse of the weekly portion of Chayei Sarah. And let's see, I know that I'm rusty on teaching. Let's see how rusty you are on reading and studying. I hope you're not as rusty as I am. Let's see, don't be shy. Let's see your hands, or if you want to read.
I want to read.
Go ahead. Linda, how are you? How is sunny California? A fellow teacher of biblical Hebrew. Good to have you, and a former student. Right.
Yeah, thank you. Okay. Vayayu Chayei Sarah, Mea Shana, Ve'esrim Shana, Ve'sheva Shanim, Shanei Chayei Sarah.
Beautiful reading. How's the family, Lida?
Good. I have 2 grandchildren now.
Oh, Mazel Tov, Mazel Tov.
Toda.
Right.
Toda.
I can see one in the picture. Yeah.
Yes, that's the first one. Yes.
Beautiful. So a little bit about a few of the words here and possibly, you remember, guys, we had a friend over. We had Dr. Avi Dentelsky talking about his new edition of the Chumash. And after we invited him and had a big talk with him, he went on a kind of a, it's called the Head Start in Israel. It's a crowdfunding for his edition, and they a website called the Torah. I don't know, maybe some of you know that website. Actually approached him, and they decided that they will publish it, and he published his edition of the book of Bereshit, and it's an interesting edition. I should have it somewhere here. Anyway, I just say that because you can go and see the conversation with him, and the reason I'm mentioning it is this is a bit of a difficult verse as far as the choice of structures here. Vayu Chayei Sarah, the life of Sarah, where not in the most idiomatic way of talking about the expanse of one's life, the duration of one's life, and you can see that afterwards we have another kind of a afterthought mentioning of Shenei Chayei Sarah. So as far as the textual criticism, some have suggested that the word Shenei should be here. Vayu Shenei Chayei Sarah me'a shana ve'esrim shana ve'sheva. Note that it's a kind of a cumbersome way of formulating what we have here. The life of Sarah were 127 years, the years of the life of Sarah. So there is a bit of a cumbersome formulation here, and he brings in his new edition, the very well-known textual suggestions, but that's not our focus. I'm just mentioning it because he was our guest, and you can go back and watch the conversation with him on the YouTube channel. Now, Vayihiyu, Chayei, and Chayei here, all, and even to an extent, the word Shana, okay, are somewhat of Lamed Yod verbs, okay, verbs whose third root letter is originally a Yod, and they behave in certain ways. I think that the grammatical analysis of this verse is also on the YouTube channel, and I don't want to focus on it too much. 127 years, 127, considered to be kind of an interesting number. The number of the life of the patriarchs are interesting. Note the same goes for the number of countries dominated by Achashverosh, Xerxes, in the book of Esther, 127. So that's the number itself. However, as I said, I don't want to focus on this. Maybe I would say a word or two about the unique situation, the life of Sarah. Abram comes to weep for Sarah and to mourn her. And the only case in the Bible where a husband is mentioned as safad, crying and weeping over his wife, well, using these two verbs, betchet yod or betchet hey, okay, and samech pei daled, are in regards to Abram, okay, and sometimes translated safad in again the next verse, but to mourn for Sarah, but it's probably a more ritualistic and more of a actual physical physical gestures of mourning. How do I know that? because in other verses, the Bible talks about the et sefod ve'et rekod. We remember the song, "A time to be born, a time to die." Right? You probably know who's the singers. I think the Beach Boys or whoever. I don't know. Anyway, whichever. So this chapter from the book of Ecclesiastes also had et sefod ve'et rekod, and and the contrast between Sephod and Rekod suggests that it's actually a physical gesture. Also, that's Ecclesiastes 3, Et Sephod and Et Rekod. And also in the book of Psalms, we say, Hafachta mispedi lemachol li. Okay, you have turned my misped in Psalm 30 into a dancing. So the fact that we have that suggests that the actions of Abram for the death of Sarah were very unusual. The only case in the Bible where a man is doing that for a woman, showing that great love that he had for her. And I think it is especially important because during their lives, we have quite a few contentious episodes that are portrayed in the relationship between Abram and Sarah. Think about Abram denying Sarah as his wife, you know. Even in the context of the New Testament, you know, the denial of someone saying, I don't know him, or I don't have that relationship with him that he claims that we have, is very powerful. Okay, so when Abraham says, you know, please don't say you're my wife, you know, it's contentious. When she asks Abram to marry Hagar, then later on she says, I'm angry with you, explicitly. Only a woman that says that to a man. Okay. I've given you my maidservant, and now she's belittling me. Okay. And when she wants to send her away, he's angry at that idea. It was bad in his eyes. He was angry with it. So we are presented these contentious situations during their lives. It's important for us to see that they had such a relationship that actually was very unique in the extent of love that they had for one another. One last point about this is that the only case where you would have a man ask man who would mourn a woman, okay, but he ends up not mourning that woman, is the book of Ezekiel. You might remember that prophecy in the book of Ezekiel, chapter 24, okay? And God tells Ezekiel, I'm gonna take the desire of your eyes, which is the thing you most desire, which means I'm gonna take your wife in this case, okay? In a plague, but I'm forbidding you from mourning her and weeping for her. Exactly the same words that Abram is doing for Sarah. So, veloti spod veloti Ezekiel 24, verse 15. So he would have done that for his wife Ezekiel, but he ended up not doing it because God instructed him not to do it. So he would have, but he didn't. So that's the only close description for a man and his wife. Again, very, very, very difficult prophecy there in Isaiah 24. Yes, so that's a bit about Abram and Sarah and the special relationship, and that is related to the purchase of Hebron. That I don't know if we'll get to, but as I said, I want to talk about one connection between the Torah reading and the Haftarah reading. It's not the only one. There are many different ways to look at these connections, but I chose one that I want to share with you, and I think it's interesting to kind of reflect on the question of why did the rabbis or decide to read that portion and not a different portion from the prophets. So we'll read a verse from the Torah reading, and the verse from the Haftarah, which is the beginning of the book of Kings, and we'll see the connection. Chris, can you read aloud Genesis 24:1 from the Torah reading of this week, starting with the words V'Avraham Zaken?
Want me to read both Hebrew lines or just the first one?
No, just the first one. It's the verse from Genesis 24:1, and we'll have someone else read from 1 Kings 1:1.
Yep. V'Avraham Zaken ba Yamim ba Adonai Barak et Avraham Bakol. Abraham was old, advanced in years, and the Lord had blessed Abraham in all things.
Right. Abraham Zaken. Note, Zaken is essentially third-person masculine singular kal katal, but it's a form of the katal that is for stative verbs, and hence it is also used as a more of an adjective. So Abram was old, and not just became old, but it could be became old as well. It's a verb, it's a stative verb, hence used as an adjective. And note that following the second root letter, we have an e vowel rather than an a vowel. So that's quite indicative of that. We have similarly kaved, heavy, was heavy, became heavy. Zaken is old, became old, was old. So that's Abraham Zaken. Note, guys, that sometimes you can have a verb in both the more active structure, and then you would see a kamatz and a patach, or the stative verb, and then you have the tzere usually. So zakan became old, more of an action. Again, maybe not an action, but a process of becoming. And zaken, arriving or being in a state of being old. So Abram was old, became old, is old, was old. Okay. Ba Bayamim, that's a phrase, an idiom, literally coming within days. Okay. Vadonai berach et Avraham bakol. Berach, again, a PL verb. Why don't we see a dagesh in the second root letter? Because a resh is one of the guttural or adjacent to the guttural letters, so it doesn't take the dagesh, and we have a compensation for not having a dagesh under the first root letter. Instead of a chirik, instead of having a chirik under the bet, we see a lengthening of that vowel into a tzere as a compensation for the lack of that dagesh. Berach, okay, Vadonai, and the Lord berach, blessed Abram. You can see the et, definite direct object marker. Et Abraham bakol, gave him everything. Okay, so the rabbis, as you know, I'm gonna lead a group of rabbis next week. It's gonna be very difficult because the rabbis, you know, if they say 2 Jews, 3 opinions, you just have to have 1 rabbi and 3 opinions. You don't need to have anyone else. It's, you know, that one of the tests to decide who becomes one of the leading group of rabbis in the Sanhedrin was that they could give 150 reasons why a vermin should be kosher. Okay, and still no, it's not kosher. Okay, Really, that's the point. And even with that exegesis of the word bakol, what does it mean to bless Abram with everything? So one rabbi said, Abram had a daughter, her name was Bakol, right? Because if he had only sons, Isaac and Ishmael and the sons of Keturah, then he doesn't have daughter, it's not everything. So he had a daughter whose name was Bakol. And another rabbi said, no. God gave Abram a son. How do I know it's a son? Because the word bet and the word kaf and lamed, the word kaf, the alphanumerical value, the gematria value of kaf is 20, of lamed is 30. Together it's 50. What is the alphanumerical value of 50? That is the letter nun. So if you count the alphanumerical value of kaf and lamed, you get the nun. So he gave him a ben, a son. So within that same community of commentator, you can have different voices. So in any case, they talk about the succession, okay, of Abram, and he gave him everything, okay, as opposed to the reading of the Haftarah of the prophet's portion in 1 Kings 1:1. Let's read that. Guys, let's see your hands. So I know you want to read. Oh, by the way, so far everybody's reading very well. Jackie, go ahead.
Okay. Vahamelech David Zaken ba bayamim veyachasuhu bab gadim velo yehem lo.
Velo yicham lo. Right.
King David was now old, advanced in years, and though they covered him with bedclothes, he never felt warm.
Right. So both Abram and David are presented by exactly the same phrase. Ve'avraham zaken babayamim in Genesis 24:1, and Ve'hamelech David zaken babayamim in 1 Kings 1:1. So you can see the same phrase introducing the state of both characters, Abram and David, but the difference is stark in the second half of each verse. You can see that each of these verses is divided here by the atnach. Okay, you remember that this mark, atnach or atnachta, which literally means rest in Aramaic. So we rest. That's the main division of the verse. This is how we divide the verse into two segments. And while in the first verse, Vadonai berach et Avraham bakol, in the second segment, Vaychasuhu babegadim velo yicham lo. What does it mean that he was covered by clothing, but could not stay warm, could not feel warm? What does it mean about David?
I'd say his metabolism was slowing down enough where he could not generate his own heat.
Okay. And what does it mean about David himself?
He was weaker.
He was weak, right? He was weak. He did not have that. He's not portrayed in a positive, shape, in a good shape. However, even though they're making that attempt to keep him warm, he could not be warm. He never felt warm. Okay, so he's weak. And the comparison.
Abraham, what about 170?
Maureen, yeah, you were saying?
I'd say David was only 70, whereas Abraham was about 176, I think.
5, yes, right. So you can see they became old in different age, right?
Mm.
So it's age is a number, right? 100 years, more than 100 years difference, and and you can see the
Amazing.
difference between the two. However, we should say that at that part of the book of Genesis, people's, the patriarchs still have a fairly long life and longevity. David lives only 70 years, you're right. And he is old and he's weak. So that's already a difference between the two. Let's see the difference reflected in other elements describing the end of these two leaders of the people, Abram versus David. Let's see the first verse, again, taken from our weekly portion, and the second verse is taken from the Haftarah, from the weekly prophets reading. Let's see the first one, guys. Yes, Anne, how are you?
Thank you. I'm fine, and I'm very glad to see you well. I hope you're not also well in soul and spirit.
Amen. 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 Yes.
Okay. Vayiten Avraham et kol asher lo Yelitzchak.
Right. Vayiten Avraham et kol asher lo leYitzchak. Very good. So, first of all, you can see the Vayiktol narrative, Vayiten Avraham. That's my verb, right? Because the root is nun, tav, and nun. We can see the dagesh in the tav, replacing that nun that we don't see. So instead of vayinten, we get vayiten. The nun assimilates into the following tav and is reflected by the dagesh in that tav. Vayiten Avraham, and Abram gave. Et kol asher lo. Note the beautiful hyphens connecting makef, or connecting these words. So as far as the reading, they are read, the makaf is instructing us to read this is one word. This is why it has only one tam. Even though nominally these are 4 words, as far as the reading, they're read together. Vayiten Avraham et kol asher lo leYitzchak. Yeah, it's but and you come from German, you have no problem putting all these words together. That's nothing for you, right? Right, 4 words, small words, even, that's like nothing in German. Yeah. So et kol asher lo leYitzchak, and the succession, okay, the is very organized. By the way, the following verse is describing how Abram gives the other children, gifts, and he drives them east. He sends them away east. Okay, so the succession is very clear. Abram chooses Isaac. He gives everything that is his to Isaac in a very organized way, while all of the other children, they know that they're not succeeding Abraham. So it's very organized. And the ability to have a very orderly succession is something that is critical for a leader who wants to have a dynasty, okay, who wants to have this long chain of his family leading a people. Yes. Do you want to read, or?
I was going to ask a question. Is this similar to how Abraham sent Hagar away?
Not exactly, but to some extent. When he sends away Hagar, it is because Sarah demands it, and the succession at that point is not yet super clear. I should say that this is a process, because to begin with, because before Isaac is born, when God says to Abram, listen, Sarah is gonna have a baby. Do you remember what Abram answers God, what Abram replies to that promise? It's a surprising reply, by the way, guys. So
He says, "Oh, that Ishmael may live before thee."
right. Abram really says no in a very polite way, saying, oh, I have already a son. May he live before you. May he succeed me. That is, so Abram really denies the suggestion of God or the promise of God to have a son out of Sarah for the, Sarah is 90 or almost 90. Okay. So Abram says, I already have a son. He's 13-year-old. He's just doing his bar mitzvah. I hope that he will succeed me. Okay.
Yet he was born when his name was Avram. Is that correct?
Yes. Avram, and then turns into Abraham. But I'm talking about Ishmael being regarded by Abram as his successor up until the birth of Isaac, because the whole story of Abram is the story of succession. Starting already, Abram starts, and Maureen mentioned it correctly before, that Abram dies at the age 175. He starts the story at 75. Okay. So it's not a young age. Abram starts his journey when David is already dead, as far as their age. And Abram is without children. And so to begin with, he thinks that his nephew is gonna be his successor. So the question of the succession is very dominant in the story of Abram and in the story of David as well. Starting with a nephew, moving to the steward, maybe, moving to Ishmael, moving to Isaac. Then God tells him you have to kill Isaac, or you have to sacrifice Isaac. So the whole concept of who's going to succeed Abram is one of the questions that really holds throughout the story. Okay. And at this point, at this verse, Genesis 25:5, Abram is 5 and 6, conducting that successful succession. Okay. Which is what starts the story, the succession of the seed and the land. So Abram gives everything that he owned to Isaac in an orderly fashion. I chose one of the verses in 1 Kings 1, but I could have chosen few other verses to indicate something that is very different in the reading of the prophets. Let's read from 1 Kings 1:18, guys. Don't be shy. Yeah, Danny, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Ve'ata hine Adonijah malach. Ve'ata Adoni hamelech lo adata. Yet Adonijah has become king, and you, my lord, the king, know nothing about it.
Right. Now, yes, Lida.
Sorry, I have a question. The second be'ata, ve'ata adoni hamelech lo yadata. That should be the pronoun you with aleph, ata, because in English it says and you.
Okay, so
Instead of and now. This
here,
be'ata.
first of all, you're right that the translation had and you, okay? But
And
I
now.
don't think that they necessarily wanted us to make a change here or something like that. I think that it's part of reflecting the agitated speech of kind of a spoken in a very I said agitated, excited, emotional moment. Okay, we see it, by the way, in Ostraka. Okay, there is a complaint letter okay, from what is known as the Meitzad Chashaviyahu inscription. That inscription, wrongly called Meitzad Chashaviyahu inscription, is a complaint letter from an area from a 7th century outpost near the sea in Judea, where the most important epigraphic finding from that outpost is a complaint letter. And that letter is a letter of a harvester complaining about his boss to the official, to the higher ups. And one of the interesting things there is the reflection of spoken language there, okay? And you can see kind of a repetitions that that are now similar to this repetition of ve'ata, okay? And so I don't know if it is necessarily a reflection of what here of a difference between an aleph and an ayin and the deterioration of the gutturals and so forth and so on, or just a repetition of the ve'ata. Ve'ata is showing her emotional state as she's speaking. Okay. Okay. So ve'ata hine Adonijah malach. And David is even unaware of Adonijah, his son, deciding to take the reins by himself, to coronate himself as a king. David, at a certain point, is losing his grip over the over his house. Okay, you remember, guys, that there is a certain promise that is given to David, not a positive one. Okay, that promise is that he's gonna lose the grip over his own house because of what he did with Bathsheba, and his sons start rebelling against him and start killing each other exactly after that. So we have Amnon and Tamar, and then we have Absalom and Amnon, okay? And then we have Adonijah, and David is old and weak, and he's even unaware of the son that decides to take, not just David is not giving it to him, he's unaware that this is happening. Okay, look at the difference, the striking difference between Abraham and David. And Bathsheba is coming before David and saying, you don't even know, okay, what's going on. They do get Solomon to be king. You remember that, and to succeed David, but in a very unorganized fashion. Okay, they have to compete for that succession, as opposed to again Abraham in our weekly portion, when even the two sons, okay, that you would expect to have a quarrel between them, okay, which they do have, possibly. The word metzachek is unclear when Sarah demands that Ishmael will be banished. The word that describes the behavior of Ishmael towards Yitzchak is metzachek, which has all kinds of connotations. In any case, at the end of the days of Abram, both his sons do carry him together to his final place of rest, which he organized for himself when he bought that Cave of Machpelah for his wife. So he has the kind of ultimate ending organized. His children are together, they're not fighting, and the successor is clear. The rest of the children, they know who the successor is, and all things are organized in a very peaceful, united, decided legacy and everything in this fashion. Let's see these verses describing that, guys. Betsy, would you like to read a verse?
Yes, hello.
Hello, how are
You
you?
stayed away too long.
I did.
It was too long.
But I do hope that we don't have to do it again. I will do it again if needed, but
I know you will.
yeah,
Thank you.
sure.
All
Let's see.
right. Vayigva vayamot Avraham b'sheva tova zaken v'shavea vayeasef al amav.
Right. So ויגבה וימות אברהם בשיבה טובה,
Say.
זקן ושבע, ויאסף אל עמיו. So we have two examples for the shin with a dot above the left-hand side, okay, which is the sin. Sin is never right. You remember that when the dot is above the left-hand side. The word seva is an interesting word. Do you know what seva means, guys?
Is it gray hair?
Very good, Monica. Seva is gray hair. The word shibu, or in Akkadian, which is also gray, okay, but it's also witness. Shibum, or in the singular, shibu, gray hair, gray, old age, and witness as well. And if you ever had the pleasure of having to go through an exam where you had to read the laws of Hammurabi and translate them into English or Hebrew or what have you, one of the interesting words that, this law code has 282 cases. It's a case law, essentially, and many of them deal with witnesses, with kind of a civil law. And the word for witness is shibum or shibi, okay? And that's the gray hair, the people with gray hair. Why? Because the old people, they know whose cow it is, whose land it is. So that's gray, old age, and witnesses. In Hebrew, the sense of witnesses is not evident, okay? But in Akkadian, it certainly is. That's the regular word for witness. We are lucky today that so many of us get to get gray hair and white hair when, in old age, or no hair, right? As people in old age did not always make it to old age. So that's בשיבה טובה, זקן ושבע, ויאסף אל עמיו. That's the worst kind of, the best kind of going away, okay? Good old age, old and content and buried with his people. And his two sons are burying him together, okay? Where he designated. So everything according to his plan. And let's see the next verse.
I'll take it if no one else wants to take it.
Oh, Shaul, how are you?
Shum davar chadash.
Okay, nothing new. My grandmother used to say, no news, good news, right?
Yes, indeed. It's good to have you back.
Good to see everybody back, guys. Go ahead.
ויקברו אותו יצחק וישמעאל בניו אל מערת המכפלה אל שדה עפרון בן צוחר החיתי אשר על פני ממרא. His sons Isaac and Ishmael buried him in the cave of Machpelah in the field of Ephron, son of Zohar, the Hittite facing Mamre.
Right. So Isaac and Ishmael are burying him together, okay, as his sons together. We're in the cave of Machpelah, okay, the cave of Machpelah in Hebron. We've talked about it. Maybe we'll say a word or two about the cave of Machpelah again today. Sede Ephron ben Tzochar Hachiti. Kind of note the construct chains. Sede Ephron ben Tzochar. Okay. Me'arat HaMachpelah, very common structure in biblical Hebrew. The most regular ways of saying something of something, using that construct chain. And they're burying him together. What happens with David? So, as we remember, David's family is torn apart by conflict and constant betrayal and struggle and strife. His final days are unfortunately marked by Amnon and Tamar, incest and rape and fratricide. Okay, when Absalom takes revenge against Amnon and kills him. Rebellion of Absalom. Okay. Another rebellion by Adonijah, definitely a power struggle or a usurpacy, whatever the verb for, or the word for taking, self-coronating and rising to the throne without the authority to do it. Usurpacy? How you usurp?
Usurpation.
Usurpation. Okay, very good. Very good. So, as was promised to David in 2 Samuel 12, after Nathan comes to David and talks with him about the situation, he says, Lo tasur cherev mi beitecha ad olam. Sword will never leave your house. Okay, the struggle, the sword, the cherev. What's the Arabic word for war, guys? Anyone? Harb.
Harb.
Yeah, the same word for cherev in Hebrew, for sword in Hebrew, is the word for war in Arabic. It's a metaphor. It's of war. Okay. By the way, have you ever been to a mosque? Anyone, guys? Have you visited a mosque?
Yes.
Very good. So first of all, I don't know where you live. If you live in, in some places, you better get used to those. We in Israel have many of those. In any case, in every mosque, okay, and they call the Cave of Machpelah Masjid Ibrahimi, okay, the Mosque of Abraham, okay, because this is how they see like pre-Islamic figures. They see them also as Muslims. Okay, this is how they deal with these historical questions. But every mosque has this portion, small niche that is called mihrab. Let me show you that in the Cave of Machpelah. They have also a niche, this small niche here. This is, by the way, the schematics of the cave from the inside. Do you see that small niche that we have here? It's pointing towards the direction of Mecca. Okay, and it is called mihrab. Okay, the mihrab, related to the root of cherev that we've talked about, is possibly where they would put the swords when they come into a mosque, because a mosque was a place that they wouldn't fight in. So some say the etymology of the word mihrab, which is that small niche that is pointing towards Mecca in every mosque, is because you would put your sword there. This would be the place of the swords, like the Mikdash is the place of holiness. Okay, and Mishkan is the place of dwelling, and so forth and so on. So the Mihrab is the place for the swords. You place your swords there. Not today, but that's possibly the etymology of the word Mihrab. And the word Cherev is war. This is the schematics of the Cave of Machpelah. Anyone has ever been to Israel but not to Hebron? But not to Hebron. Very good. So you might recognize these stones. They look exactly like the Western Wall. They look like the Kotel. Because Herod the Great, who built the Temple Mount as we know it today, and renovated the second temple. Some would even say that he built the third temple because his renovation was such radical. Okay, he also built the Cave of Machpelah, the structure over the Cave of Machpelah as we know it today. So the stones, you go here, you feel like you're in the Kotel. And moreover, this design, okay, this design that you see here, do you see these are like columns?
Mm-hmm.
These are not columns, but they look like columns. Okay, you have the wall built in a way that some of it is kind of in the back and some of it is in the front. Okay, and that style of building is called pilasters. Okay, and this is, first of all, you have it in many places, in many structures. You might recognize these structures. You see them in kind of a classical design. You have it in classical design, but also in modern structures. So it's called the pilaster. I'm writing the word in the chat box. Just a second. Getting used to everything back. Too long. Okay, yeah. So in the chat box, that's a pilaster. And the reason I'm mentioning it is because the Temple Mount also looked like that. The upper wall, okay, that surrounded the Temple Mount also had the same design. Very, very common design. You look at classical or even neoclassical structures, you may see something that looks like a column, but really is part of the wall. Okay, and that's how the temple, that's how the Temple Mount was designed as well, with pilasters in a similar way to that of the Cave of Machpelah. Let me show you.
The stones change abruptly. Look at, they go from large block to small bricks.
Yeah, let's see if I can show you. Yeah, yeah, I can show you a reconstruction of the design of the second temple. Yeah, I'll show you this. Okay. Bear with me. Okay. Yeah, this is a reconstruction of what the second temple, after the renovation by Herod, this is how it looked. Okay, and the part that is covered in is surrounded by this red is what you have today in the Western Wall, in the Kotel. So the design that we see in the Kotel, okay, the top parts are later. They're not second temple, okay? And the bottom part, the big stones are, okay? And the part that used to be there was based on these pilasters, similar to what we have. Oh, guys, sorry. Now, do you see it now, guys?
Now we do, yeah.
Okay, sorry. I was talking and made the mistake of that they teach tour guides not to do. Don't talk about something they don't see. Right. So that's the lower part of the Western Wall where you have the big stones. The smaller stones in the Western Wall are not Second Temple. During the Second Temple period, after the Herodian renovation of the Temple Mount and the temple, you would have pilasters, exactly as you can see in Hebron. Okay, so that's the connection to Hebron and the temple, and we still have that long-standing. This is the oldest, by the way, long-standing public building. I think that was kind of still serves today as a public building, the Cave of Machpelah. Again, the structure is from Herodian time. The cave itself underneath it goes back to the time of the patriarch. So Cave of Machpelah and Hebron and the wood and the Mihrab. We've seen the Mihrab inside the Cave of Machpelah. And so that's all related to this week. And the Haftarah, we've talked about the Haftarah teaching us or showing us the comparison between Abraham and David and the different, very radically different succession between the two. Again, David and the succession of David is so messy because of his actions. That's one of the connections between the Torah reading and the Haftarah, and we also connected it to the Cave of Machpelah, which is purchased by Abram in this week's portion for his wife Sarah. This is the cave itself underneath, and the possibly why Machpelah, one after the other. The word kafal, or the root kaf pei lamed, has to do with double. So possibly the fact that we have couples that are buried there. Okay, Abram and Sarah, and Isaac and Rebecca, Jacob and Leah. So that's the Cave of Machpelah. I wanted to leave some time for your questions, guys. So go ahead.
Netanel, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Yes, I can.
This is Russ. How do we know what the temple looked like? I've seen reproductions of it, but I never heard that there were any drawings of it. So how accurate are the reproductions that we see for the temple itself?
First of all, very good question. It's a very good question and a very legitimate one. And it's generally a good question about everything they tell you that it was like that, like this. First of all, in the case of the temple, we know from several things, okay? First of all, we have historical sources. that are written and describe some of the things. Secondly, we have archaeological evidence, both in situ, what we find in sites, in the site of the temple itself, and in contemporary buildings. So I don't have the temple that was built by Herod, but I do have the Cave of Machpelah that was built by Herod. And I see, I know it's a kind of a recursive answer, right? So I'm playing a trick here. So those of you who got me, we're kind of smiling now. That's all right. But this is how the world of archaeology is a bit like that. How do you know? Because in other sites that are similar, we see something, okay, let's say pottery. I find a pottery, I find a jar, I tell you, this is a jar of that and that period or that and that culture. How do I know that? Because in other sites that are similar, we find the same pottery. And sometimes we have kind of a way to anchor that information, okay? Through carbon-14, through connecting it to textual evidence and so forth and so on. So basically is by, and that's a general question, comparison to other sites. So we know that, for instance, a historical source is telling us, I'm taking this example of the pilasters, okay? That the wall of the Temple Mount, we know from historical sources, Josephus and so forth, we know that someone described it as waves of the sea, okay? And then we see the design of the pilasters here, okay, which is Herodian, which is of the same period, which uses the same kind of stones and techniques that we do still have in Jerusalem. So the combination gives us ability to suggest, oh, this is how it is. Sometimes even things that were part of it. Remember, the southern part of the Western Wall, the fallen stones there are still from the same Roman conquest of the 70, okay, 70 of the Common Era, the destruction of the temple. Some of the stones are the very same stones because they were buried and they were big, they were difficult to move. So we have a kind of a combination of evidence in the place, historical sources, and other sites that are of the same period, of which we can learn on questions that we don't have at hand. As with other questions, it's not a science per se, it's scholarship and art. It's not always science in a sense that I don't have like an equation with which I can, prove that if 1 + 1 = 2, then the structure of the temple must have been so and so. But I do have, it's not just guessing, but it's educated, hopefully very educated extrapolation of the information that we have. Is it 100% solid? Different, pieces of information would be to different certainty. I think that in this case, the reconstruction of the pilasters is very, very reasonable, combining the knowledge that we have from historical, literary sources, and archaeological. But the question is excellent. Do it to every tour guide. How do you know that? Yeah. Yes, Lida.
I have a question. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead. You started, Lida.
Okay. Yeah, my question is on the verse 2 of Genesis 23. It is the last part of the verse. It says, Abraham lespod lesara belivkota. The older manuscripts shows that the letter kaf there is a small kaf. There's an anomaly. Do you remember that? Just like in Bereshit.
Yeah.
just like in Bereshit, the letter Bet is a gigantic one, but this
Right.
one, the letter Kaf, is a small one. Why do you think is that?
Okay, so yeah, I'll say kind of a general remark about unusual letters. Also, you can read about it more in the Introduction to Textual Criticism of the Hebrew Bible, which probably you have by Professor Tov. Very good book. And he actually mentions a paper I did as a graduate student. The last edition, he mentioned it in one of the footnotes. So let's see how well you read the book if you find my name there. And and he talks about the bigger letters, smaller letters, and so forth and so on. Now, the rabbis have noted these things. Some have suggested that this is because when she died, she was already old, okay? So he didn't cry as much because she was, after all, in olden days. That's the common commentary that you would see in rabbinical literature. Okay, the truth is that we don't really know. Okay, we don't really know, but this is a common thing that people say, that because she was old, it was he didn't cry much. Okay, but the truth is that it's not something that we always know. But the stories, you can take it to different places, and yeah.
Yeah, but there's a lot of them. There's a lot of the anomalies.
Yes, there are, and actually the fact that there are, interestingly, and the fact that they are consistent throughout different manuscripts,
yeah,
is one of the indications for the very, very meticulous copying of the Masoretic text. That's one of the ways to identify that branch of Nosach HaMesorah, the Masoretic text, is by looking at these exceptions and saying, okay, they are very consistent throughout different manuscripts and different times and different places. And thus, even if we cannot necessarily pinpoint why, they accredit the copyists, especially when you don't know why, with a meticulous work. So, because it's not that it has a perfect sense of why it's like that, but it is like that in many places. So the common rabbinical reference is that Abram did not cry a lot because she was already old. But it's there are other ideas. Okay, there are other ideas, and I think that it's right. It's very difficult to suggest that based on the verses themselves, because as we've seen, the reference to him crying over her and mourning her are quite unusual when we compare it to other men and women in the Bible. But this is the common rabbinical exegesis for that. And again, if you read the word without the kaf, it's then kind of in self-induced inflammation of that crying. Libui in Hebrew means to kind of flame something. So that's the suggestion, but I don't have a very good answer as to why. Okay. Yes.
Thank you.
Sure. And yeah, go ahead. Any questions?
Who
Oh, yeah.
I
Yeah, sure.
Last week's portion has Abraham living in Beersheba and Sarah dies in Hebron. Why are they not in the same city? Or are they?
Listen, they had to keep, good relationships, so they had to live apart, I remember, I'll tell you a story. When we were newlyweds, my wife said, listen, we have to, be together the whole time. And you can ask your father. I said, you don't know my father, I'm telling you. And she said, okay, let's ask your parents. We came to my parents, and she said, to my father, when you were newlyweds, how were you as a couple? And my father said, you know, Linda, my mother was doing her fellowship. I was busy in the military. We had a great year. Yeah. So that's the no, but they moved all around. Abraham moved all around Route 60, the route of the patriarchs. Yes, he decides to be buried in Hebron because he sees importance in that area, in that cave, in that region. So they live in Beersheba. They go around Haloch v'Nasoa Negba. They move around. Remember that Abraham initially comes to Shechem, and he goes all the way through Route 60, that road of the patriarchs, marking his land because God tells him, "Kum hitalech ba'aretz le'orka u'rochba." Arise, go about the land through its length and its breadth. Okay, and so Abram does that. So he resides in different places, and he kind of.
I got the impression that they were living separately. Sarah was in Hebron and Abraham was in Beersheba, because that's where they go from the last portion. That's where it was left at, and then we moved to Hebron here in this portion.
I don't know, but I can think of a situation where a mother whose only son is taken by his father and almost not brought back would be a bit angry about that, but I don't know. It's not explicitly said that they lived separately or something like that.
Okay, you started talking about rough portions in their relationship, and this could be another one of those rough portions.
It might be. We've talked about that in the beginning of today. Where Sarah was during the Akedah is the binding of Isaac is a good question, guys. It's good to be back. Yes. Thank you, guys, for I'll have to think of the way to do things, but I'm very happy that you took the time to come, and we'll try to keep this next week the same time, or we'll see, and we'll try to do it. Okay, so thank you all for coming, and I hope to see you next week. And thank you so much, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, back. Thank you.
Yes.
Shalom, shalom. Bye-bye.
Shalom.
Shalom. Yes. Thank
Bye-bye.
you so much. Bye-bye.